Hello guys, it's me again, I'm Nafid. In this video that will last for nearly an hour, we will talk about a bunch of things. And it is mainly about ClearPass authentication service, but we would like to look at different components. Basically, we'll talk about the cases whereby you have users who connect, they will request access. These users can be anything basically, but we will specifically focus on the wireless users. They will connect and they will establish connectivity, they request service from a ClearPass. So mainly speaking, we're going to talk about a bunch of things. So the list of things that I would like to talk about is how to join ClearPass to AD domain, Active Directory domain, how the authentication source can be configured, how to add the network access device, integrate with external servers, like mobile device management as well as messaging service SMTP, how device fingerprinting works, so we're going to look at that, how roles are created and the role access role mapping policy, how to build enforcement profiles, which are the actions that will be sent back to the NAT device, which is either a switch or a controller or an AP, and then how you combine all of these together. Then we would like to look at how this is, so we're going to look at building blocks for the service, i.e. Authentication service, and we'll look at how to build that authentication service. On top of that, we'll show you how to perform connectivity testing, AAA connectivity testing between ClearPass and the NAT device, and we'll test connectivity from the client, and then we'll look at the access tracker in this case. So let's go for that and explore different options. So here, that's a ClearPass. We have logged in and we need to go to administration. So basically when you log in, you are on the dashboard. You go to administration. It's ClearPass version 6.11. You can clearly see that. 6.11. And you need to join the domain. So you go to server configuration. You open your server. Now we need to join the domain. So scroll down a bit if your screen resolution is not good enough. And then it says in here, it's not part of any domain. You can join multiple domains. I'm going to use the domain returned by DNS query. So the DNS or the NetBIOS name that will be translated training. So if that shows up, it means your DNS is working correctly. And we would like to use specific admin here. It would be cp admin. Click save. So that's it, done. Everything looks fine. And if you click on the actual server, we would like to enable Insight. You must make sure also you enable Insight or enable, even if it is the only server available, you will enable this one as an Insight primary server. Even if it is the only server available, you will always enable it as the Insight. And then you set the settings, you are done with the Insight. So now what we've done, two things. We joined the domain and you can clearly see that this is a joined domain and we have enabled Insight. Now, as we will go to the configuration and authentication, you can see there are two areas here, methods and sources. You click on the authentication source. These are the built-in default authentication sources. You can see them in square brackets. So after we have added it to domain, again, these are two separate things, but we need to add to a domain in case of EBEEP. But if we're using EBTLS, we don't have to add to a domain. So we're going to add Active Directory as an authentication source in this case, and we're going to assign that. So we're going to do the add and whatever name. So probably we'll do and the type we're going to go for AD, Active Directory, and it will be the source. This authentication source will always be used as authorization source. So they will fetch the role mapping attribute, meaning if I need to use any attribute you receive back from that server, that should be accepted as an attribute that can be used as a role. You go next, And the host name, again, each Active Directory will have their own details, but we're gonna just go paste this. That's the host name we use in this lab. So here you can see Aruba-AD, which is the name of the domain controller, .training. That's a fully qualified domain name. And we're gonna use CP admin at training, and the password we're gonna go. If that doesn't translate into NetBIOS, it means you have an issue with the DNS. Make sure don't type it, you don't have to, because if that is correctly configured, then you should be fine. You can specify a subset if you would like to. In this training on this, we're gonna go for OU equals to ClearPass, and we're gonna leave it as is. So now we're gonna save this. You can see this is the search, if you like, string, or the domain where, or the specified area in the domain where you're gonna start the search. And we go next. Now these are the attributes that will be fetched. These are what call them the filter, the query to that location too. So we can obviously adjust this if you would like to do this. Yeah, but we will leave it as is for the time being. We're gonna say save. If you'd like to control the timeout for the ClearPass, normally 30 minutes by default, you can go to administration. So you go configuration and you go to cluster wide parameters, and here you can see the idle timeout, and the idle timeout is 30 minutes. Session idle timeout by default is 30 minutes. I think the maximum is 1440. If you try any other value, I think minimum is 5. It will, I try to save it, it will error message 1440. So we're gonna go for the 1440. Yeah. Of course, in real-time environment, I wouldn't do that, but because we're using this as a lab, it's much easier that way. Yeah. So again, going back to this, we can go and have a look at devices. By default, there are no devices, so we're gonna add, and whatever name you like to call it, so we can go and give it a name. So in the lab we do have we have a controller, a mobility controller. We do have a switch as well. So we're gonna add Aruba controller here. We're gonna give it a name. Now you can see the options available, but our controller, simply speaking, has the IP address of 10.1.60.0.100, 10.1.60.100. There you go. And then the password, we will add the if you are going to use this for TechX Plus service, then you need to add that as well, right? So just add it from here. We need to add another device. In this case also, it's Aruba OS, which is a Hewlett-Packard switch. So again, the IP for this 10.1.60. I'm going to use the same, do the same. And the vendor name in this case is Hewlett-Packard, so we're going to go for the H. You can search, obviously. You can just go for this. So there we go. Now these devices, we can add attributes if you would like. So I can go, for example, here, and I can add attributes. These attributes can be used. Now, these attributes can be used for many purposes, but one of which would be maybe a condition in the service, as we're going to see it later on. These are built-in attributes, so you can always use these, and you can add or configure your own attribute if you would like to. If you like to do this, yeah. So here we were going to use device type, and the value for that one, we're going to add it ourselves. So we're going to say wireless controller. We're going to save it. One of the other things we can use is also called device group. So we can add a device group, and basically they might be based on location, type, range of IP addresses, anything. So I'm going to just add, for this is very simple, won't make much difference, but I would like to show you this as a feature. So my devices. And here the format for that one, I'm going to go for list. And we have two devices only, so we're going to just add them. And I'm going to save. So we created device group and we called it my devices. We can later on use that device group in decision making. We can integrate this one with the messaging emails, with an email server. We're going to have a look at that. We go to administration here, and we go to external devices or servers. Here we can see the list of external servers. One of them would be messaging setup. Now that's a lab environment, so we're going to just give it simple settings. So here we're going to see we're going to provide all details of the server basically. So that's the IP. Again, the username will be related to this specific environment. We can save, we can send the test. So recipient email, we're going to just go for the same email. Again, this is lab environment. We're going to save it. So we're going to log into our system. So we're going to have a look. It's just even any bogus. So this is a test email that was sent, and this is hello from left. So ClearPass, we have tested the ability of ClearPass to send a test or send an email to that recipient. We'll also show you quickly how to connect to a context-based server MDM. So we've done messaging setup, and we're going to add the endpoint context server, and we're going to add one here, and the one of them will be any of these things basically. In our case, we're going to go for mobile iron core. And the server name will be, I'm going to copy that, paste it for ease of use. authentication will be basic, and then we're going to tick that one, fetch the endpoint because we're going to use them, and we're going to save. So there we go, and we're going to go for this and trigger pull. So we're going to just get the information from that specific MDM user or device, and we should see all information that has been received under the endpoint. So we can go click on this one. Pull status should be successful. Invalid endpoint, that's fine, but the total has been imported from the mobile device management is 41. So if we go actually under the identity, you can see the endpoints being populated without us connecting to any of these devices. Obviously, this is us. This is our server or the ClearPass, and the rest is what you see or what has been imported from the endpoint. You click on any of them, you will notice these devices have or not showing IP address. The reason for this, because these being pulled from the MDM database, they are not really connected, they are not authenticated devices. That's why you don't see any IP address value for them. So for the profiling of the devices, we said there are multiple different methods, one of which would be the DHCP. So we will send the traffic for the DHCP request to the original, the true DHCP server as usual on that VLAN where the client connects to, and also will pretend that ClearPass would be a DHCP server. So simply speaking, we go to configuration, that's on the controller, mobility controller, the NAD device. We will go to VLANs, and the VLAN we are doing in this case is 61 in this example. So this is the VLAN where the client will end in. So we go to IPv4 and we go to IP assignment and DHCP settings. We will go for relay to an external, right? So in this case, we have to add the real DHCP server. So we're going to do, that's the IP address of the proper DHCP server that will release the IP to the client. We will also add the IP of the ClearPass itself. So the ClearPass will be part of that request. So the request would be sent to two servers, ClearPass, which will not respond, but we're going to have a visibility into the traffic of the DHCP request, and the actual DHCP server that will really respond to that client request. The IP address of the ClearPass 10.1.69.11, that's the IP. So now you notice there are two IP addresses, one for the proper DHCP server and one for the ClearPass that will glean the information from that request. I will apply the changes. Now in this case also, once we have done the DHCP relay on the controller, we will configure the IF map, CPPM IF map. So we're going to go for the system, profiles. If you don't see all profiles, what we can do, go to preferences and show advanced profiles. Yeah. So we go to other profiles here, then CPPM IF map. You will enable this and you will add the CPPM server basically, which is a ClearPass server. You will fill all the details. The port number is the secure number 443. Username, this is the username when you log into ClearPass itself. submit the changes. For the IF map to work, we need to do one more step on the ClearPass itself. So we go under the administration, server configuration, cluster wide parameters, and you go to profilers, profiler tab. By default, it will not be processed. Process wired device information from IFMap interface, which is in this case, we have configured on our mobility controller, which is the NAT device. By default, it is not being processed. So we're going to say true, and we're going to say save. So that's being done on ClearPass as well. Again, remember, for the ClearPass, how does it know about the profiling is through dictionaries, and you reach or you update dictionaries in the under administration tab. You go dictionaries, and you can see that one of them will be the endpoint fingerprint or device fingerprints, and these will list all different vendors. So you can see we have 6 or 1 different types of devices, from Cisco to Aruba to different types of the FortiGate and multiple different things. Obviously, you can display up to 1,000 on one page, so you can see all of them listed here, and that's why it knows this device is a Linux or this device is Cisco, Aruba, Juniper, and so on. And you can manually define your own fingerprint. So basically, you can add your own definition if you would like to, and then you can reapply to add an already discovered device or devices in your endpoint repository. I'll show you how to do that. So you are under the dictionary device fingerprints. You can go to add, and you can define your new category if you would like to. So let's just define a new category here. Obviously, we can filter either category or something, or families, say family, and we can sift through to see our newly defined fingerprint. We call this one Aruba server. Okay, now we can apply this one to an already existing device or devices, or to newly discovered device. So we can go back to configuration, identity, endpoints, and the first one is basically our ClearPass guy. Yeah. So here, that's the host name, that's the device category, and that's the operating system family. We can click on this, and we can see details. So I'll cancel this, but I can select this and update. So we can click on update fingerprint. So we can go and override fingerprint that already on the system, and we can change the device category and make it, we can just type filter, make it easy, or you can see it actually listed here because, and then we're going to go cppm, vim install, and save. So you can see the device fingerprint has been updated. That was a manual update, but we can create a rule where you can, any update will be updated or will be sent automatically to the newly discovered devices. So let's go for that. So we'll try to create a rule for that purpose, and add a fingerprint rule. So what's going to happen should a device in that category be discovered? So we can create our own rules basically, and then let's select also the category, the family, which is one family, simple one, and device name. Okay, and these are the rules we're gonna update should a device be discovered. So we'll add a new rule here, and we will have the first rule save this rule. So we added one rule here. We can add another one. And there we go. So now imagine the ClearPass is being discovered. So we go into dictionary and endpoint fingerprints or device fingerprints, and we can click on this. We can clearly see there are rules here created. We have created, right? We added or we discovered. Okay, so close this one. We can prove it by deleting the ClearPass and rediscover ClearPass again from the device repository, and that a new fingerprint would be applied to that new device or newly discovered device. Let's create a local user basically. So we'll go here, local users. We can see there are no local users by default. We're gonna go add, and we give any ID, but we would like to call it contract. And we will select the role. We will not create any new role. We're going to create select the built-in. So the new user has been created, and that's the only one or the only local user that we have created so far. Now we would like to create multiple roles. So we are preparing the ClearPass for the next few steps, and so we created a local user, and we're gonna create some new roles, basically tags, roles. And remember from earlier we have joined a ClearPass domain, and we have added the authentication source as an extra one from the Active Directory. Let's go for that. I'm going to create 4 different roles here, and I will go over. So these are the 4 different roles we can filter. So we're going to go, I would like to go for underscore. The name contains underscore, and these are the 3 different users. One is missing because that doesn't contain underscore, and that's the 4th one we have created. And we can see the list of all of them. There we go. Temp user, smartphone, computer, and the rest. And corporate user. So the roles have been created. We need to build or create the logic or the role mapping rules when those roles would be applied to the user, basically. So it's kind of a if statement. If condition, then role applies, and that's in the role mapping. So we go for the role mapping in this case. So these role mappings, we can see there are 2 built-in. These are built-in. This is a built on these 2 built-in. So that's what we're going to do. We create our own role mapping rules for the newly created roles to be mapped. We're going to create them, and we will build the logic. make sure we go for select all that match. Because if you select the first match, then the rest, if any match, then the rest will not be tested. So select all that match. It makes sure every single one. So this is a mechanism, if you like, that we can assign, have multiple conditions for the role to be mapped. Yeah. So this is the reading from the remote AD or the lab, which we have created before. And what is returned from the attribute this is something we add. And then for this, we will assign corporate user. We can add another role, rule number 2. That's a rule mapping policy, right? So So we have 4 rules here, and we will select all match. So the role can be mapped to devices should any of these conditions be met. And these are the 4 different conditions. We're going to save it. So this is our role mapping policy. We call corporate role mapping policy, and these are the 4 conditions. It says evaluate all, right? Now we're going to configure the actions. We call them enforcement profiles. So under the enforcement, we go to enforcement profiles. These are built-in enforcement profiles. We have not created any. You can clearly see this. These are all in square brackets. And we will create our own enforcement profile, means actions that will be probably sent back to the mobility controller should the user authenticate. So here we're going to type the deny all, would like to send back to the mobility controller. So we're going to do this, and we're going to finish this by saving it. So we created a profile, i.e. an action that will be sent back to a mobility controller. So another profile, another enforcement profile, we will call it assign So that will be sent back to mobility controller, Aruba user role, VSA, and so basically we created the actions. We call them enforcement profile. So these all, we can filter. The name contains assign. We have created 4 different actions. Okay, now we're going to create the logic behind which these actions will be used. Basically, we created the roles in here, in the roles, and we created a role mapping. When shall that role be mapped? And that's a policy for the role mapping. So this policy is going to be used in the service. We will show you in a sec. So simply speaking, these are the firewall roles that will be sent back to a mobility controller. If you look at your mobility controller here, and you will notice that you go to configuration, roles and policies. You will notice all the roles that we have created there exist here, basically. So if we can filter by name, and you're going to notice that profile only role exists here, employee full, that's one, full access, deny all, employee device, employee smart, right? Profile only, temp access, and we have all the roles deny all as well in here. So basically these are firewall roles. If you click on any of these, let us say, these are the policies in the firewall role. In here says for the deny all, IPv for source any, destination any, to any service, deny all, basically. So we will then build the service. So under certain conditions, these VSAs will be sent back to this controller to control access for that specific authenticated user. Let's go back to mobility, to ClearPass to continue and configure our services. So now we will build the logic, so the if statement kind of stuff, right? So we go to the enforcement policies. We're going to create our own enforcement policy, and we're going to add one. This is where you glue the conditions together, basically. So in the enforcement policy, we give a name, and it's radius type, obviously. We now need to add the rules for that, how that works. So we add a new rule. So select first match. So we're going to add the rules here. Okay, so these are the conditions. These are like if, then, or if this condition and that condition and that condition and so on. So we're going to start from here, and the type tips. Again, tips has no meaning whatsoever. It's just from the old product name. So this type tips is just a parameter used because of old product name. So we say the logic here, tips, if the role equals to corporate user, what to do? Okay, the profile name will be corporate user. So we will send back assign full employee role here. So meaning I will assign the user the full employee role. But I'm not really going to stop here, so I'm going to just have another tip. Yeah, so another condition here. So if the user has been assigned 2 roles because and the other role is computer, then in this case I will assign full employee role, and there we go, save it. So we have created the first rule, if you like. It has 2 conditions, and we say the role, if it is corporate user and the role is computer, then you will assign full access. We'd like to add another rule here. There we go. Again, we're going to go for the same. But the other condition would be in this case smartphone. So could be a corporate user but using maybe a handheld device. Then we will assign employee smart role, right? Employee smart role. We add another role, or third condition. These can always be amended and changed. And 2 things here, tips. So we have 5 conditions, so we're going to save it. We must select the default profile, obviously, so come here and the default profile will be deny. So if none of these, we will deny access, basically. So coming back to the enforcement policy, which is the logic behind taking certain actions. So we have created 5 different rules, if you like. Each rule has 2 conditions in this case. You can have as many conditions. Probably you can later in the future come back and just re-edit and do these conditions. So to summarize what we've done so far, we created 1 local user. We went also created roles. Remember the roles, computer, smart device, and others, whatever. So these are different roles that we have created. And then we went to the role mapping. We created a role mapping rules or role mapping policy. These are the conditions that have to be met, if you like, for the role to be assigned. And then once the role is assigned, the policy comes into play here. So the enforcement policy will say, okay, if a role is assigned, in here, each one of these rules, we have two conditions. Except the last one, we have one condition. So now we need to configure the service. There are multiple different ways, 3 different ways. The first one would be manual creation. There are templates you can use, or you can use the full wizard here if you would like to go through this. So we're going to show you at least the manual creation, because we have all the components and all the ingredients for the manual creation for the service available, basically. So what we're going to do, we will add a service by clicking on the plus sign on the top right corner. We're going to select the service type. In this case will be 802.1x wireless, but we'd like to go for more specific one for Aruba one. That makes it easier, that's all. Yeah. We have to give it a name, as you would have expected. Now, obviously, because we'd like to make it more specific, the first 2 conditions are generic ones. Now we're going to go for the last condition here. We're going to change this one into contains. So we're going to say contains, because our SSID is secure something. So we're going to say contains secure. It means these are the 3 conditions, and it says match all. All of the following should be matched. Service rule, the matches, it says all of them, and we're happy with that. We'll move on to the next one. Even you can go for the options here, the profiler. We're going to enable one of these options, profile endpoint. Okay. And we're going to also go for the other option of authorization. So you can see tabs are showing up, but we're going to go step by step and go to the next, which is the logical step here. It says authentication. So it depends what you'd like to do. So the authentication method probably, you can leave all of that because e-beep is at the top, or you can just remove it, or you can move it down. I leave it as is. Okay. You can have other authentication methods if you would like to do. We're going to leave it as is, and at least for the time being, we're going to use this one. The authentication source has to be specified in this case, and for the authentication source, we would like to authenticate both local users as well as remote users from the AD. So we're going to go for the local user repository, and the next one up, or the next one from the list, we'll select our configured authentication source, remote lab AD, that we have earlier configured that one as well, right? That's in the authentication source. Next, because we have ticked the box for authorization, it by default will use every authentication source as authorization source for the attributes to be fetched from. And we need to add something else, because this is what we have indicated. We would like to use the endpoint repository on the local SQL database as another or additional authorization source. Then that's all good. The role, we created our own role mapping policy, and we call this one corporate role mapping. These are the conditions that will all be evaluated. So there's a possibility that a connection might have multiple roles. And again, remember, the role is just simply a tag. We move next. Again, remember, we have built our components. We have built our enforcement policy. We're going to change this one to our built enforcement policy, the logic, the glue, if you like. If none of these conditions met, we have 5 different rules here. None of them has been met. It will deny. Look at this default profile, deny access profile. And then we go next. In the profiler, what we need to do is, this is basically simply about using because when the user connects in .1x, it is not categorized. The system doesn't have any clue what that specific device is. Upon the request, upon the discovery, so once that device gets categorized, and we say any category, what to do. We would like to, because this is Aruba now, I would like them to send Aruba COA, which is basically the wireless one, because this is a wireless system, right? So Aruba OS terminate session. That's what we would like to send. Dynamic authorization, we call it sometimes. Aruba wireless terminate session. And we're going to go next. And all of these, the summary shows that all of these conditions, authentication, authorization, and so on, will be summarized, and we're going to save it. To be quite honest, we can order it, reorder it. I'll show you how do you do this. It doesn't really make much difference, but I would like just to show you. So I will go to reorder stuff, and you click once, you release the mouse, and you just move when the mouse button is not pressed. So I only selected once, and I move up, and I wanted to make it move to the first position. So I'm going to move up, click on the blue line in this case. This service has become at the top. We're going to save it. Let's mimic a case of a failed authentication request. So what we'd like to do is we will go and just create an issue. So we'll go to the device, remember network device. This is the Radius client or the NAD network access device. And we're going to just change the Radius shared key. I'll just give any value. And we're going to save this. Now we are on the mobility controller. This is the NAD device. We will log in. We go to diagnostics. And in the diagnostics, we'd like to test. So AAA server test. And we're going to go for the Radius. I'm going to provide the username user and password, whatever password. We're going to send a test. This is testing the communication between the NAD device and the mobility controller and the Radius server. Authentication failed. This is what we expect, and we created the condition for the authentication to fail, right? Notice here, the NAS port type says asynchronous, username user, and then the service type is login user. Okay. So it means if I don't know really how to build the service on ClearPass, I can use this information to build or help me build the service for that. Okay. Notice there's no SSID, location ID, AP group, nothing, because that is a test being sent by the NAD device to test connectivity to the ClearPass in this case. In ClearPass, because there's a mismatch in the Radius key or Radius pre-shared key, you'll see that information under monitoring. You go to event viewer. You notice, look at this. It says error here, failed to decode Radius packet. This indicates that a mismatched shared key may be incorrect, but most likely that is the case. So we can clearly see the request is sent but has been rejected. Notice that there is no entry in the access tracker under live monitoring. There's no entry here. This is all to do with the admin TechX Plus, right? Because this is something different completely, but for that specific request is not being sent. So what we can do, we can fix it. I'll show you now. We'll go back. We'll fix the NAD device pre-shared key, the controller. We'll put it the correct. We will add the correct pre-shared key. We're going to save it and we can try it again. So there we go. Test again. This time it will fail because for a different reason. So if you look here, again, it has failed. And the reason for this time, because we can find an entry in the access tracker. It says alerts cannot find the service. So service categorization failed. So it did fail, but for a different reason in this case. You can look at the input and look at the radius request, the details of the request. And it says in here, service type 1. Okay. NAS port ID is 0 and NAS port type is 0. You can build a service pretty much from this entry or these entries where you can configure IETF service type equal 1, and it is a synchronous service basically. And you look at the computed attribute. These are details, some wireless controller, and anything else that they can suss out, like the username, IP address, the request port ID, and so on, will be also part of the computed attributes. So this is now another failure, as we have seen before. Going back to the ClearPass itself, this time should be an entry in the access tracker. And you notice the entry. What we need to know is how to build the service. So I'll show you from the output of the access tracker. We might get some clues what is going on. So in the input, you will notice the service type, the IETF service type 1, and the NAS port 0, NAS port type 0. So in our service conditions, what we will be doing is we will create a service with the conditions that with the service type equals 1, with a port type equals 0. Now, if you also noticed the possibility of testing either PAP or MSCHAP. So these are going to be the authentication methods that we will include them in our service. So let's create a simple one, a very simple service that will help us perform the AAA test. So we're going to just add a service. We'd like to give it a name, AAA controller connectivity testing. Okay, that doesn't really matter. So we're going to just service type, we're going to say not 15, we're going to make it service type, remember, asynchronous, which is 0. Okay, and that's the service type. We save it, and the service the NAS port type, here we're going to go for NAS port ID, because we've done the NAS port type. The port ID will be 1. So here, if you type 1, come here, just type 1, and that will do the stuff for us. Next, the authentication methods. I would like to remove all of these because we're not using EAP. So I'm gonna have the PAP and the MSCHAP. So MSCHAP as one authentication method, and the PAP, which is this, and the authentication source. Up to you, but I would like to use the local user database, and you create a user, whatever user you're going to use for testing. I go for next. We leave everything as is, and we're going to save that. So now we have created a service to fulfill our requirements. So if we go back to the mobility controller and perform the testing, I created the user, by the way, and perform the testing, we'll see, oh, the testing failed. NAS port type is asynchronous, and service type is login user. So I think we made a mistake here. We can look at monitor and see what the problem is, why this has failed. Service categorization failed because the entries are not matching the conditions. So NAS port type 0 and service type 1. Okay, I think we missed that. So we go back to type, and here we say service type. equals 1, which is user login. That's the correct way to go. Right. So 2 conditions only. NAS port type, where did we get this? From the request and even from access tracker. Send successful. Okay. So we have managed to test connectivity, MSCHAP, and we could obviously send PAP, because also PAP is used. Normally PAP will send the text, i.e. the authentication clear text, but MSCHAP will be a little bit more secure. Also successful. We should see at least 2 entries in the access tracker, and you can clearly see this is the service that's been used. Notice the input. That's the input, and MSCHAP successful, MSCHAP version 2 and encrypted one. And if we go to the latest one, we can go back 1 step back, and the input here we can see user and the services, as you can clearly see. Very simple. So that has been successful. So let's try to connect now to the WLAN. That's the WLAN, so we're going to connect. And let's now double check our ClearPass friend. We go here, and this is the latest one that we have had. So this is the time 11:36. It is 11:36. Okay, so click on this. You can clearly see this guy or this connection has picked up some roles: temp, user, and computer. Temp, user, and computer. It was previously connected. If you notice that initially when it was connected, it was sent a dynamic authorization. And the reason for that, because it become known to the system. So basically what it is, it's already being categorized in this case, right? And so that role will not be applicable. If we deleted that endpoint from the endpoint repository, so to have a full test, we disconnect, we come here, and we're going to go for the endpoint, and we delete that specific device. Or we can delete all endpoints from here. So to start fresh, click here and delete. So we're going to delete everybody. So the endpoint repository is simply empty. So there we go. Right. And to play it safe as well, we will also delete it from the mobility controller. So we're going to go AAA user delete all users. Show user, there's nothing here. So now we will connect again, and we should see 2 entries, one before categorization, the next one after the categorization. So we go for this, connect again, and we should see that listed here. So we go to monitor, access tracker, and we can see the contractor. So in this case, the contractor is there. And it has been assigned the computer as a category. Notice twice. So here it was sent dynamic authorization, is disconnected, and they will reconnect again because the category wasn't clear. So here everything seems to be fine, and notice the roles that have been assigned to that specific device. Well, these are the roles that have been assigned to a specific device. Again, that's the initial role or initial roles being assigned. There's no category here, and the fact hasn't been categorized. It shows that they needed to disconnect that user and reconnect it again, and the user is not really aware of that. So after we have deleted the endpoint information. So the device connected initially, there's no computer role. It means category is not clear. And what happens really, part of the profiler, it was disconnected, and then the client reconnected automatically again. In this case, the category is computer. Everything is working fine. Thank you so much for listening to me, guys, and keep tuned for any future videos. And if you need any help, then my details are in my channel. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in future videos. Thank you.